Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another unit pre-release during Wuthering Waves' anniversary. And this time, of course, it's going to be for none other than Denia. And so we're going to be taking this pre-release as we typically do when it comes to these newer units. We've got the full kit breakdown over here that we're going to be going through in great detail just to see how this unit functions and whether or not she's worth pulling. But before we do that, we gotta take a look at her combat showcase. We know we've already gotten a bit of a preview for what her kit is capable of. You know, the ashes to ashes, you know, all of that stuff. But of course, Kuro Games always typically hits it out of the park when it comes to the production quality over here on all these showcases. So why don't we go ahead, see what this one is all about, and give our takes for it from there, and then get on into the kit breakdown. Oh yeah, that's cinematic. Yeah, they've been doing this more. What I like is that, like, usually, these are, like, the guys chasing you. These are usually the guys that are, like, chasing you, right? They're the monsters, but they're the ones running away from Denia. Because, like, those are her big old meaty mitten hands from Aleph 1. Bro, she is a horror monster. Look at that shit. Bro, they're terrified of her. Bro, they are scared of her, bro. Does she just switch on a dime, bro?
Relax. I told you we'd meet again.
So she could just decide, hey, I'm gonna be all schizophrenic for a second, and then we'll... Yeah, no, this is bipolar disorder, the character. Bro. They're doing so much to make, like, her student side be all, like, goofy and stuff, but, bro, all we've seen is her being a fucking freak. That's all we've seen so far in this game is her being a freak, so, like, I don't buy any of this bullshit.
Surprise, surprise!
You know she spends, like, 2 seconds of her rotation in this form. You only saw, like, 2 animations in the other form, didn't you?
Meaningless fight. Bit by bit.
Well, at least she seems to have a better control over her emotions than during the story quest, at least. Yeah, she seems like she's in better control of her emotions than during the weekly boss fight, so that's an improvement for sure.
Devour.
Oh, is this it? Yeah, that might be the that is some tacit mark power creep over there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be honest with you. That is some tacit mark power creep. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch that one. Does it start here? Oh yeah. Bro, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, like, those soda commercials from, like, 2005 or, like, 2007, maybe 2010, right? Where they would have, like, that drop of, like, the cola liquid, and they would start, like, fucking doing weird shit like this. Yeah, no, this is definitely giving me those vibes. This is like a nostalgia hit for some reason. Yeah, it's like this is like the advertisement for Lean. It really does look like grape. Oh, they did actually change the Ashes to Ashes voice line. Oh, there you go. Congratulations, boys. You did it. Last one wasn't even bad. I mean, she sounds crazy in both, so it's like, hey, you might have liked the old one better, you might like the new one better. I don't fucking care. I don't care enough. She just sounds mad here. She sounds a little bit more mad, less cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Oh. Oh, what's going on?
Humans are social organisms that survive mainly on sensory input and habitual thinking. Before entering the target area, please ensure total retention of this protocol.
Wait, so is this like a fucking training manual that she had like way back in the day? Hey, by the way, here's how to act human. Here's how to act human, by the way. You're not actually real.
In the target area, please ensure total retention of this protocol.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. That's giving me some CIA, MK Ultra, LSD vibes over there. That's some fucking 1984 shit, bro. That's a little bit unsettling. Public school point of view. Yeah, maybe like, I like, maybe like not in the USA, but like, I'm sure there are a couple of countries that are like that. I'm not gonna say which ones, but I'm sure there are at least like a couple of countries that are like that. Yeah, no, that looks like it's gonna be a pretty baller showcase. Very interested in it. Looks like it's gonna have some relevant story reveals. The main thing that really stood out to me is the little, you know, the kind of like juxtaposition over here of her being all like goofy and stuff, but this isn't like, I don't even think this is like the real Denia, bro. We see so little of her. We know so little about her. This form is the one that actually feels like fake. I think most people can agree with that. While this one over here, I think there's a reason why a majority of the showcase is her like kind of like popping off over here. Yeah, and I do think it is rather telling that like she's in this form as she's getting like indoctrinated. That's a little bit interesting. But anyways, that's gonna be the combat showcase. Always like to start off with those first. Now let's get into the real meat of the discussion over here, and that's going to be, of course, Denia's profile reveal. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's start breaking down her kit and see whether or not this is a unit that you should be pulling. So first things first, she's got one of the most loaded sort of like kit descriptions I think I've ever seen. Main combat role, fusion burst support, and tune strain support. So oddly enough, this unit that's getting released in version 3.3, right, is actually the best in slot support, or probably going to be the best in slot support for some of the 3.1 units. Think your Imiths over here in her fusion burst form, right? And then your Luke over here in his only form, tune strain. So, yeah, she seems like she's actually, like, rounding out the whole 3.1 DPS cast, which is a little bit interesting, but at least it's being done comprehensively in one unit, just, you know, like, a couple of months into release. Then, she's gonna have dual combat modes. One's gonna be called Stagecraft form, which is her baseline one. Actually, this one over here, while Breakdown form is her Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs form, the schizo one that we saw so much of. And so when it comes to her support abilities, she's gonna have lasting enemy gathering, or persistent grouping that lasts quite a long time. It's actually 30 seconds of grouping, and some off-field damage as well. Who could have thought that your favorite sub DPS over here would have off-field damage and grouping? Probably very good at Whimpering Waste. Now let's go ahead. Let's see some more details about good old Fraxidus Denia over here. All right, so her attribute's gonna be Fusion. Who's surprised? Fusion Burst character is Fusion. Her weapon's gonna be a Rectifier, so you can probably imagine what that entails when it comes to your weapon options. You don't have very many. Resonator Essential Materials. Dream of Stars, I do believe, is available in the new 3.3 region. I haven't fucking checked myself, but I'm just assuming that it is. Burning Judgment is actually going to be from the Reactor Husk. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Burning Judgment is what you use, I believe, to level up... Why am I here? To level up Mornier. And if you go to, like, the boss challenges and stuff, it should be... Yeah, it should be available right there. That's how you get that material. And then for a weekly boss, ooh, to farm Denia, you're going to have to farm Denia. Yep, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, she's going to be using herself as her weekly boss challenge material. Who could have thought? Good luck grinding that boss. Don't do it in public. And then Splice String is going to be her skill level up, Matt. You probably have not even farmed this one at all because you never needed it before. She's the first Rectifier character in Lynae Roy. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you've got none of these, if we're frankly going to be real over here. Just like you saw that she had a fuck ton of combat rolls and like supporting ability up here, you're going to see that again down here. Concerto Efficiency, so she's got a short rotation, supposedly. A Tune Strain Response. Resonance Liberation Damage Focus. Just the 17th character so far that's been Resonance Liberation Damage Focus. Very creative, Kuro Games. Tune Break Boost. So she's got that buff built into her kit. Real Splice Memories also might be working out here. Traction, and the Fusion Burst. She also applies Toon Strain. So, yeah, maybe that's something that they could have put in here, but maybe they ran out of space because she already does so much already. Yep, this is a dual form character, ladies and gentlemen. It's effectively like getting 2 characters in one. They're hyper-specific characters, but this is like, it's like a Swiss Army, like, she's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, right? But, like, she only has, like, the screwdriver head and the knife. But she's really good at screwing in nails and cutting things. But, like, it's not really a Swiss Army knife anymore. You get what I'm talking about. Now, we gotta talk a little bit about her kit. And I've had I'm not sure if privilege or pleasure is the right term to use, more like the misfortune of reading this entire thing beforehand. Some of the stuff in here is really, really, really pointless to look at. So we're gonna be skimming over some of the stuff in the simplified overview, then kind of like break it down a lot more in the detailed kit breakdown. Her kit is not that long, but it is like, a lot of the stuff, you'll be like, why is it in here? The first thing that you're going to be like, okay, what's really going on here is the breakdown of her normal attack. Basically, this is all just kind of like fluff. Her normal attacks don't really do much of anything except build up some of the resources in her kit. It's just a simple 4-hit attack animation over here in regular stagecraft form. You can kind of see it. Woohoo! Awesome! All right, and then her plunge attack is going to be... Woohoo! Awesome. All right. Yeah, she bounces on a bubble. Great. Then she's going to have her breakdown form, her schizo form. And now you can see over here a nice 4-hit attack animation. Looks a lot cooler. Yeah, she's kind of using them hands. And then the plunge attack. Uses the hands and then the bubble. Awesome. That's kind of like it, guys. Her basic attacks just charge up some of her fortes. They don't really do much else. Now you're going to have the heavy attack. Look at this one. Awesome. So she kind of like throws a bubble and then uppercuts them. And then this one's going to be... She plays volleyball with their body. Great. Now, resident skill over here. This is where stuff starts getting a little bit important. The first cast in her baseline for Phantom Bubble, it actually pulls in nearby targets and deals a little bit of fusion damage. That's cool. Her second resident skill, though, in her enhanced form, right? Her liberation buff form, this one's a little bit different. The first cast is a bait. It just pulls in nearby targets, deals fusion damage, but then shares a cooldown with a different ability. And then this one over here, Banish. You don't want to use Beckon. Banish is the one that you actually want to use. And this one actually consumes a resource called a Dark Core, and essentially has 2 different states if you consume a Dark Core to use this. This is whatever special resources. So what this does is it'll pull in, deal damage, and then you can follow up with a normal attack or another resident skill cast to cast stage 2. And this actually deals liberation damage. That's going to be kind of like the kicker over here. And the more dark cores you consume with this attack, don't worry, we'll find out how you get those later, the more damage it actually ends up doing. So this can be one of the bigger nukes in her kit. And now we got her liberation, the breakdown over here. This is where stuff's going to get a little bit confusing. So the first cast is where she transforms. And what this transformation does is it deals damage and then gives her the entropy shift breakdown form, which is essentially a buff that she'll provide to the entire team for 12 seconds. And then she'll switch back to her other form. Hopefully by the end of her rotation. And final act over here. When conformal charge is full, she'll consume all of it and all of her void particles, which is one of her other resources, deal damage, and then obtain the entropy shift for her regular form, which lasts for 30 seconds, and then she kind of goes back to like the goofy form. This attack can also be used in midair. So essentially, what's going on over here is that she typically opens up her rotation with the first cast right here, generates a bunch of like her resources or whatever, and then proceeds to spend them, consume them to use this final attack over here. And when you consume all those resources and you do this final attack, you'll generate something called an erosion field from her Forte. And what this does is it pulls in nearby enemies every 4 seconds and deals fusion damage that's considered liberation damage. So you can kind of see, likely by now, how her kit works. Go in, transform, get your void particles and dark cores and all of that shit, deal damage, slice them up with those hands, max out your conformal charge, then use the second cast, then generate the erosion field, and then have some of that persistent grouping off field. That's mainly actually it. And I'm just gonna be honest here, guys. That's a majority of her kit. Now we're getting into her intro skill. It's been a while is her baseline intro skill. And this one simply lets her advance to the 4th stage of her basic attack. Nothing too crazy though. Knock Knock is her intro skill that's available in her breakdown form. Probably not likely for you to use this in most traditional rotations, but do keep in mind that this will reset the duration of her entropy shift breakdown state. So it does actually give her a fair amount of quick swap potential, assuming that you do decide to like intro skill in at like different, at like different intervals across your T's rotation. So definitely something that you can think about. It does show that she's a little bit more quick swap oriented in her design compared to some of the past units that we've had before. And now her outro skill. This is where stuff gets really, really, really interesting. Because what did we not see when we were taking a look at her entire kit? What's the difference in her kit and how does it work based off of whether she's Tune Strained or Fusion Burst? This is the first little bit of clarification we're going to get. So her outro skill in Fusion Burst form does this. Fusion Burst damage against targets near the active resonator is amplified by 60% for 30 seconds. And this only ends early when Denia switches modes. So this allows you to quick swap between members of your team, and the outro skill will not disappear unless Denia switches forms. So that's something to keep in mind. This does give you a little bit more freedom over there. And when she's in the Tune Strain form, the incoming resonator has their damage amplified by 15%. For 16 seconds. This will be the longest sort of like individual outro skill in the game. If you guys are familiar with how like other outro skills work, you probably would have realized that most of them only last for 14. Denia's is going to last for a whole 16, which is really relevant for a Luke Herson because his rotation kind of ends up taking longer than 14 seconds if you don't do a shit ton of dodge cancels. But with 16 seconds, it should be pretty likely that you never end up dropping your sub DPS's outro, which is probably like what you're looking for over here. And this is how you know it's made for Luke. When after this resonator under this effect inflicts Tune Strain shifting, which like kind of only Luke and Lynae can do, and Lynae's not a DPS, right? They gain 40% all damage amplification instead. Luke is getting some very, very, very serious buffs over here, but that's kind of like what Denia's role is. She's either a Luke sub DPS or an Imeth one. Like I said before, she's a Swiss Army knife, but she only does 2 things. And that's kind of like the truth over there regarding that. When it comes to her negative status, her Fusion Burst outro skill though, it does seem pretty typical with what we see from other characters in the game. The main thing that I'll say though is that yeah, the Fusion Burst amp isn't nearly as high as like Chakona's. You see over here, this one is only 60% for 30 seconds. Chakona's is 100% for 30 seconds. So at a baseline, this might just mean that negative statuses are not fucking balanced, and Fusion Burst just naturally deals way fucking more than Arrow Erosion does. So maybe Arrow Erosion just needed a higher value. But yeah, that's what Chakona's is looking like. Just so y'all are aware. So yeah, maybe Fusion Burst naturally just deals a bit more damage. But that's just something to think about. That's going to be our simplified kit overview. But what you're going to realize is that we still missed a lot about how our kit functions. So we'll be getting there in just a second. So let's just start off with the combat guide. This thing is trash. This thing is useless. But we'll read it anyways. Grants damage bonus to resonators in the team. When in resonance mode Fusion Burst, she inflicts Fusion Burst. Like I said before, this shit is useless. You probably would have thought that Fusion Burst mode would inflict. Anyways, let's skip her inherent skills for now, and let's go back to her Forte over here, because this is where we're really going to be able to understand all the various resources in her kit and how they work with each other. So, Forte Circuit Flawless. We already know all about the erosion field. This is what pops out after she uses the second liberation over there. Ashes to ashes! Right? That's going to suck in enemies every 4 seconds, deal fusion liberation damage to them during that time. Great. Awesome. We figured that one out. However, this is another resource that she has. It's called a Void Particle. When in the breakdown form, while holding Void Particle, normal attack consumes Void Particle on hit and grants the following effects. The skill damage is considered liberation damage, and the damage multiplier is increased by 50%. And conformal charge recharges 100% faster. So conformal charge, we're gonna have to figure out what that is, right? When she's in schizo mode, breakdown mode, dealing damage with anything, but specifically the second cast of her Banish Resonance skill, the one that costs Dark Matter, or Dark Core, that's going to grant 40 points. So you can kind of see over here, casting that special enhanced resonance skill that we saw all the way up here, right? This one's really important to building up her conformal charge, but you need a Dark Core to do this one. And when you have Void Particles, your basic attacks over here in breakdown form will consume the Void Particles to actually deal more damage that's considered liberation damage. So that's where some of her resources come in. They simply like buff some of the other attacks in her kit, but her other attacks aren't really doing anything too crazy here. So that's how that Void Particle resource works. And remember, you recharge 100% faster when you're consuming this effect. However, you might be wondering about other ways that you can actually get Void Particles. So, first things first, here are some of the ways. She holds up to 100 points of Void Particles normally, and while in Stagecraft form, baseline one, Pink Denia, not evil one, dealing damage through a normal attack grants Void Particles, and casting her intro skill or her bubble, they both grant 25 points each. So I wouldn't be surprised if her rotation ends up being like intro skill, basic attack to get like some Void Particles, then like resonance skill to fully cap it out. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up getting her to 100 Void Particles. Something along those lines. And when it comes to Dark Cores, remember Dark Cores are used to buff her resonance skill. She gains 1 Dark Core every 12 seconds. And she also gains 1 Dark Core upon casting her intro skill. So that's essentially how it's going to work. While she's in Entropy Shift, which is gotten from her Liberation, and from her intro skills in either form, that's how she generates the Dark Cores that are then used to buff her Schizo Mode's Resonance skill to deal more damage. And the more Dark Cores you have, the more damage this stuff ends up dealing. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind. So that's going to be all the resources in her kit. That's going to be how she gathers them. Now we need to do a little bit of a breakdown over here. We're going to skip this whole Toon Strain and Fusion Burst stuff for now. We'll get to that in just a second. Now we gotta do a little bit of a breakdown over here of the Entropy Shift forms. As we all know, her Liberation is what allows her to enter her different states and then also get the Entropy Shift buffs that are available in both states. For Breakdown form, which is her Schizo one, she buffs her own attack by 30%. Then that buff is removed when she switches back. In her baseline Stagecraft form, the buff she gets is 1 point of Void Particle generation every second. And then, well, switching back to her Schizo form to deal damage, you end up losing that buff. So she has another way of generating Void Particles over here to, once again, remember, Void Particles are going to be important because they allow her to charge up to her conformal charge faster, cast that second Liberation, so on and so forth. The goal of a sub-DPS character, at the end of the day, is to get on field, intro skill in, and then rotate through their entire kit as fast as possible. And once they rotate through their kit, apply their Concerto buff to the next teammate. So you can see that a lot of the stuff in here is about charging her resources faster. That's because that's the main goal of her kit. That's the main goal of her function. And of course, it's always good when a sub-DPS is able to rotate quickly. So that's what we're looking at over here for all these resources. Now let's get into the differences between her Fusion Burst form and her Toon Strain form. In Fusion Burst form, the following attacks over here inflict 2 stacks of Fusion Burst each. Her Intro in both forms, her Liberation in both forms, and her Erosion Field. The persistent procs every 4 seconds, that gives her 2 stacks of Fusion Burst on each enemy hit. On the other hand, these attacks only trigger 1 stack. The 3rd hit of her basic attacks, the 4th hit of her basic attacks, some of her mid-air attacks as well, and some of her mid-air attacks in her Schizo mode. So yeah, Denia in her enhanced state also has a 4-hit basic attack chain in the air. It functions very similarly to the one that she has while she's on the ground. And those 3rd and 4th hits, those are going to be the ones that go ahead and apply not as much Fusion Burst, but still more than just 0 to the enemy. And the last little bit that she has is if she's in the team, if somebody dies to Fusion Burst damage, it will count as being caused by the nearest active Resonator. I assumed that was the case before, but I guess like the kill was credited to like the environment or something before. I don't fucking know. It's a little bit weird. That's going to be her Fusion Burst form. And as you can see, she has a lot of application in a lot of different places. Now, though, for the Toon Strained form, it's going to operate a little bit differently because Toon Strained is kind of It doesn't need to be applied in a bunch of places because there's a limit to how much each character can actually apply. So there's a reason why all of these attacks only trigger one stack of Tune Strain Shifting. Her intros in both forms, her liberations in both forms, the third and fourth hits of all of her attacks. That's it. They all just apply one stack of Tune Strain Shifting because that's kind of like the max that you can actually do. And when Resonators in the team inflict Tune Strain Shifting on the target, their off-tune level is increased by 50% of the max. This essentially means that when you go into the TOA, or you go into like any boss fight in particular, this will be the effect. This is how that ability would essentially work. If you just went in and then you dealt any application over here, that character's or that enemy's off-tune buildup rate would immediately go up in this top quarter up here. It would immediately go to like 50%. Just from using like any attack that applies Tune Strain. So that makes it so that you can get your first Tune Break off way faster on the enemy and then make your future Tune Breaks, right, also occur more quickly as well because you're getting that head start. The only thing is that this effect can only be triggered on the same target like once every 300 seconds. So it's kind of like each enemy that you fight ends up spawning in with 50% of their off-tune build-up rate already there. That is essentially how that is going to work. And all I'm hoping is that this effect resets in between TOA runs, because it would be disastrous if you like reset your boss run and then this was like still on cooldown. That'd be like fucking crazy, because then you have to wait like 5 minutes between TOA clears to fully have this buff. That would be absurd. But that's just something to keep in mind over here. She has a very, very, very strong feature in her kit that gives her that ability to Tune Break a lot faster. And when it comes to a character like, well, let's just be honest here, like Luke Herson, a good part of Luke Herson's damage is based off of how quickly he can Tune Break an enemy. Basically, this inherent skill over here makes it so that if he Tune Breaks a lot faster, he can transfer stacks of Tune Strain a lot faster too. And so Denia is really going to make this inherent ability of his, Pulses Under the Snow, a lot stronger. She's kind of like his 1000% like his best in slot at this point. So yeah, if you're a Luke enjoyer, another solid reason to pull this character. That's going to be your Forte circuit. And like I mentioned before, you got a lot more detail over here about all the different resources in her kit. But that's kind of just like it. I know, you all were probably expecting the most complex monstrosity ever, especially given the fact that she has two forms, but Denia's not really that complicated. Now let's go ahead, break down her resonant skill. So, like I mentioned before, Phantom Bubble just goes in and then pulls in nearby targets and deals fusion damage. Beckon, her Schizo form's initial cast, that does the same fucking thing, basically. But then Banish, the one that requires Dark Cores to cast, this one's really, really, really important. Because, remember, it's a two-stage ability where the first stage pulls in nearby targets, and then the second stage consumes Dark Cores and deals a fuck-ton more damage based off the number of Dark Cores that you consumed. And remember, you get the Dark Cores every 12 seconds and on using your intro skills, so it's kind of like, you know, this is an ability that you're meant to use every single rotation. And then we've already taken a look at the Liberation over here, talked about the different entropy states, so there's nothing to really talk about. And now we got a normal attack. And as you can see over here, this is some of the most pointless shit you've ever seen. Yep, she's got a 4-hit attack chain, ladies and gentlemen. And then when you dodge counter, you can advance to the 4th stage. That's it. No, I'm serious. That is fucking it. No, it's just 4-hit attack chain and then deal fusion damage. But do remember, if you have the Dark Particles, all of your attacks in breakdown form will be buffed to deal more damage. That's basically it, though. I'm serious. And now we got her Tune Break. When the target's off-tune level is full, she can cast a Tune Break on the target. However, though, when she is in Tune Strain form, Denia does have a bit of a personal damage buff because she can inflict it and then also respond. And then based off of Denia's Tune Break boost stat, right, her damage to targets that have Tune Strain interfered on them is increased. And this is where we gotta take a look at the last part of her kit over here. Remember how we skipped these inherent skills? These ones are actually really important. When Denia engages in combat in Stagecraft form, restore Dark Cores to 2 if she has fewer to 2, and restore Void Particles to 20 if she has fewer than 20. So this makes it so that When Denia starts off her rotation, she's got enough resources to be able to seamlessly go through her first rotation. Additional dark cores, but remember, she gets one from her intro skill, so she's going to have 3 dark cores ready for her first rotation. That's solid. And then when it comes to void particles, she's already going to have 20 as well. So it's probably going to be very easy for her to get to 100 in her rotation too. So yeah, this inherent skill over here just makes it so that her first rotation is smoothed out and doesn't feel like shit. Remember, going into entropy stagecraft form from using her second liberation makes her restore void particle points while off field. So this just kind of like ensures that her rotation works properly. And now for her second inherent skill. This is the big one. This one's crazy. While in entropy shift, so essentially after using her first liberation and then going into her second one, she obtains the following effects based on her current resonance mode. Fusion burst. All resonators in the team gain 30% fusion damage bonus. Pretty good. Like, pretty actually good if we're going to be honest over here. Just 30% for existing. This is going to stack up very, very, very well with one of Denia's best in slot sets. Fucking hell. All right. Yeah, we're gonna be trapped in here. Give me a second here. So what Chromatic Foam does is it's going to give Denia a 10% fusion damage bonus to herself, but upon casting an outro skill, she's also going to grant a 25% fusion damage bonus to the incoming resonator. Imith is going to be the one that receives this outro skill. So Imith is going to get a bonus of 25 from the Sonata set and then 30% from here. So, yeah, potentially close to 55% attack. Oh, wait. Right. Oh, yep. Oh, doesn't Denia have an Echo set as well? Oh, yeah. Her Echo also gives 12% fusion damage. So it's actually closer to, is that literally 69? Or sorry, is it literally 67? 12% plus 55. No, that's literally 67. Yeah, Denia will provide, as far as I'm concerned, 67% fusion damage bonus to Imith. That's where I'm going to leave that. 67% in fusion burst form. Now, though, on the other hand, she's going to have a Tune Strain form. And this one's going to be pretty crazy, too. All resonators in the team gain 10 Tune Break boost. And when a resonator in the team has an off-tune buildup rate over 100%, every 10% that runs over increases their Tune Break boost by 8 up to 40. So essentially, she can provide 50 Tune Break boost for, like, existing as long as Mornier is on her team. This is a little bit unfortunate, at least in my opinion, where her Tune Break boost passively is based off of off-tune buildup, which Mornier provides. I do believe Mornier straight up provides 50%. Yeah, I do believe she applies 50% with her Syntony field. So, yeah, by having Mornier, Denia, and I believe Luke Herson in the team, you'll be able to cap out that 50 Tune Break boost passively, but you'll also have this kind of like in the background as well. The Sonata set that everyone's been waiting to find a user for. Reel of Spliced Memories, which is going to provide an additional 20. So Denia by herself can possibly provide 70 points of Tune Break boost with Mornier on the team. If you're all aware of how Luke Herson's inherent skill works, you'll see why this is so beneficial for him. When Luke Herson's skills directly damage targets affected by Tune Strain interfered, every 10 points of Tune Break boost he has amplifies this instance of damage by 5%, up to 30%. So yeah, that basically means 60 points of Tune Break boost, which, well, Denia can provide that without Reel of Spliced Memories because he has 10 at a baseline. Giving him 50, well, that's going to bring him up to 60, right? But with the extra set, she'll cap it out at like 180 for him. However, this is another thing about Tune Break. When responding to Tune Strain interfered, for each stack of Tune Strain interfered on the target, each point of Luke Herson's Tune Break boost increases his total damage against the target by 0.12%. And guess what? Tune Break boost has no cap here. So you're probably seeing, for Luke at least, yeah, no, these are some pretty big damage buffs. These are some pretty substantial damage buffs. So yeah, going to 180 Tune Break boost, getting 70 from Denia plus her set. There's no cap on this buff. There is a cap on this one. But remember, there's no cap over here. And also, consider this, guys. Every other person on the team that responds to Tune Strain, well, they're going to get that Tune Break boost buff too. Even Denia gets the same exact thing. So, assuming Denia's personal damage is decent, well, looks like she'll get a bit of an increase for that buff as well. And remember this, Denia causes the enemies to get tomb broken really, really, really fast. And this damage only happens when they're in interfered. Shifting is the state that they're in before you tomb break them. You have to tomb break them, apply interfered to get this damage buff. And Denia lets you get to the interfered state so much faster because of how her Forte buff works. Remember, 50% of the max immediately. So hopefully you can kind of see what's going on over here. Denia's got a lot of damage buffs. A lot of them. And as a bit of a, like, spoiler warning over here, we're just gonna have to take a look at her weapon, boys. Her weapon also provides a massive attack buff as well. She has some of the craziest buffing I feel like I've ever seen in the game, to the point where I actually feel like her kit's gonna deal no fucking damage. It almost doesn't make sense at all for her kit to deal any damage to me, because she's got a lot of, like, just a lot of damage buffs everywhere. 67% fusion damage bonus for Imith, just from existing. And then a shit ton of points of, like, tomb break boost, attack as well, all of that goodness in the other form. I think she's going to be a character that potentially, depending on the new additions to the game, I think she's a character that potentially will actually have the same value as Lynae. But unfortunately, guys, she is a little bit more constrained and definitely not as applicable as Lynae is. And one of the main reasons for that is very, very, very simple. One of her forms is kind of, I think, cooked. I think the Fusion Burst form, I don't think she's ever going to have a second Fusion Burst DPS to work with. I think the only thing that could end up happening is that it gets a different support that's not Shisa, and they get like a new negative status support, and then you can have like a variation of the team. Unfortunately, the Toon Strain one is the one that seems like it's going to be a little bit more general use case. But the Toon Strain one, its Tomb Break boost is tied to having a Mornier on your team. So the core really is, it's like Denia Imith for Fusion Burst, with maybe the third slot Chisa getting replaced in the future. But then the other core is going to be Mornier and Denia, because Mornier's off-tune build-up rate boost is what's required for Denia to provide her Toon Strain boost. So unless there's like a Toon Strain main DPS that comes out in the future, and there's probably going to be another one, I think it's obvious why Denia's outro skill is just 40% all damage. It's so that we can have like a future Toon Strain DPS, right? And from what we know in the game, Kuro loves doing this goofy fucking thing, right? Where all the standard banner weapons end up having like a user of some type at some point in the future. I think it's kind of obvious, based on some of the standard weapons that we've seen in the game, that there's going to be more Toon Strain DPS characters. Because, well, look at this shit, brother. Sorry, don't look at the Boson Astrolabe. That thing is some garbage. Edgebreaker. Dealing damage to targets under Toon Strain interfered grants 24% liberation damage bonus. Bro, we don't even have a Liberation Broadblade DPS other than, like, fucking... We don't even have one except for Calcharo, bro. So it's kind of just like, somebody's gonna have to apply Toon Strain, deal Liberation damage, and then also be a Broadblade character. Like that's got to be out here somewhere. So, like, there's bound to be more Toon Strain characters in the future. At least that's what I would assume. Maybe I'll take back her being as popular or as good as Lynae, because her kit comes with a lot more restrictions than Lynae. But is she going to be very good with Luke? Absolutely. Very, very, very broken for Luke. Is she going to be good with Imith? Absolutely. Probably really fucking broken with Imith. Is she going to be good with any other characters on release? Maybe, probably, potentially not. I don't really see her being that good with Galbraina. I don't really see her being that good with any other, like, Toon Rupture character. I don't see her being that good with Brant. I don't know. Like, maybe you can run some sort of, like, weird team where, like, she's in Mono Fusion, but, like, maybe you could do, like, Lupa. Shit. I don't fucking know. Like, like, Mono Fusion, but then, like, she's on Mono fusion, but then she's the second. I don't fucking know, bro. It's just it seems a little bit cursed to me. But surely there's some way. Surely there's some way that you can use like her 30% fusion damage bonus, bro. Right? Like surely there's some way you could do something with that. So yeah, we'll see. But she might be a more like for fun unit for most accounts, just because I don't think she has as many use cases as Lynae. But that's just me. Let me know what you all thought about this breakdown and whether or not you're going to be pulling this character. I think she's strong, but I think she is a little bit tailored. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.